Yeah. And we're live. Uh, so hello, everyone. We are just going to give people a second or two to join us here. Um, we are live with the lovely Catherine, longtime PADS volunteer, supporter, uh, now client, with the lovely PADS Bowyer, who is snoozing on the cool floor at her feet. So we won't disturb him just yet, but we might ask him to make an appearance a little bit later because, it's all about the dogs, especially handsome ones like Bowyer. So, Catherine, I'm going to start, as I always do, to ask you, how is it you came to be part of the PADS family? And your role has changed over the years a lot. So, feel free to kind of chat a little bit about how you became a PADS client as well.
Sure. So we got like an hour or 2 hours for this question? Or? Okay. So I love that question because I love, of course, that I got involved because my mother-in-law is the well-known Billy Mitchell, who had PADS hearing dog Sandy. And that's how I first heard about PADS. And it was through her and through Donnelly and Jack that Ian and I learned about raising. So we started raising. What year was that, Tara? 2007, I think.
Yeah.
I think what you were saying. I think you had, yeah, you said something like that.
Years, so.
Tara and I had our first puppies at the same time. That was
good. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were raising, and then about almost 5 years ago now, we started to raise the lovely Bowyer, and we moved up to the Caribou. And he's a very, very smart boy, very sensitive boy. And he made it clear when he went down for advanced training that he didn't want to live down in the city. And he was very bonded to us and I think to the farm. And so, because I'm a psychologist, Margaret wondered if I would take him as an AFD dog because he was all trained up, but didn't want to go to anybody. So that's how I ended up with Bowyer. And that was when I started with the PTSD program. It was not too long before that, maybe a couple of years. And, a couple of years ago. We wanted me to be able to have a dog when I go and interview the applicants, just so that, it's just another set of eyes to kind of see how the applicants respond to a dog like Bowyer. Boyer's pretty laid back, but he can get quite enthusiastic with some people and want to come and put his feet up on their lap, for example, that kind of thing. Or he might just kind of chill out right on the floor. You don't really know with him. That's been Boyer's role. He comes to work with me. I have a very small private practice now. I'm retired as a psychologist, but I still see some clients. And I do my work with the PTSD program as well.
So I'm going to welcome, because we've got a bunch of people who have now joined us online. And so I'm going to kind of formally welcome everyone. And if you're watching us on Facebook, if you have questions for Catherine or I, you can throw those into the comment section on Facebook and we'll try and answer them. If you're on Zoom, you can click the Q&A button if you have questions. Or if you want to tell us where you're watching from or any kind of just general comments, feel free to throw those in the chat box. So you'll find those little buttons, which you can see kind of on the screen behind me in the bottom navigation bar of your Zoom window. But again, Facebook comments work as well. So with that, Catherine, it's National PTSD Awareness Month. And so that was one of the reasons that we'd invited you to join us, because you play an important role in our PTSD program. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that looks like in terms of working with our new applicants and getting to know them?
Sure. So one of the really lovely things about PADS that I have discovered over the years is just how carefully the team goes how carefully they match the dog to the client. And when it comes to the PTSD program, they really, the programs really need somebody like a psychologist or a therapist who's got experience with PTSD and complex PTSD. And that's partly for, when we do the initial interviews. So I either go to the homes, or since COVID, I do these online. I usually speak to applicants for about an hour and a half sometimes. And I do partly a formal interview and partly just a chat and kind of get a better sense of these people. The information that I get, I think, is, a lot of it is sort of confirming or affirming what Margaret and Val have already seen or picked up. And then also, I think it can be useful just in terms, just in working with clients with PTSD, in terms of the team training, different issues that might come up. Some people are really comfortable doing it in a group, some really not. How do we adapt to that? And of course, again, with COVID, that's affected things greatly. So I just gather a lot of kind of general information from the clients, and then Margaret and Val and I put all that information together, and as I said, those decisions are made using a lot of that information. How do we match? What's the right dog for this client? Is the client ready for the program? Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they need a little bit of time, some things they have to get together. So because of course not every applicant is accepted in. Yeah. So that's my basic role. And you go ahead, Tara.
I was just going to say, I think that's the interesting part, is that, your role kind of looks after both sides of the partnership. And so, while we obviously would like to put dogs with as many people as possible, we also have a huge responsibility of ensuring that, our dogs are being matched and placed in environments that are ready and prepared for all the responsibility that comes with. And I think PTSD is kind of one of the areas where sometimes that can challenging, but it's something we look at for all of our applicants. Yeah. So
absolutely.
But I love too that it's a process, that it's not a no, it's a not yet, and here's how we can work with you to kind of help move things along. So I love that piece of it as well. So
and the other piece that I'll just say, the other piece that I do too is after placement, then I'm available just for consultation with both Margaret and Val. And again, that's around generally working with clients, working with the matches of the clients and the dogs, and how things are working with them. All of it is really to try to put together the best, quite individualized program we can for each client and each dog.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so we've got a couple of questions coming in. So Jill is asking, how can I get info on volunteering in North Van? So if you go to our website, to pads.ca/volunteer, you can find information there about volunteering with us. Right now, our intake is closed, but there is somewhere that you can sign up there to be notified when our intake opens. So we had a huge backlog of people that had already started the volunteering process when COVID hit. And of course, we had to put all of that onboarding on hold because we couldn't train people and meet with people. And so we're just in the process of working through that backlog right now. And then we'll reopen once we need additional folks. So hopefully that answers your question, Jill. So thank you so much for your interest. And then, is there ongoing support of the PTSD clients? And so I think, Catherine, you could probably speak to this piece.
Yeah, there is. So, and I'm not quite sure what kind of support you mean, but in terms of the teams, there is. Always, of course, limited by manpower, the number of hours that Margaret and Val have. But that is one thing that is somewhat different from the other programs, in that there tends to be some more regular ongoing opportunities for updating training and just really being able to check in. And uh, I had, and I want to talk about this more later, but also in answer to that question, I had the absolute pleasure of doing a follow-up with our clients in February. And one of the things that many, many people commented on was how much they appreciated that follow-up that happened with Margaret and Val. And again, it's always limited by the number of hours they've got available, but yeah, it's there. And then also, many of our clients have ongoing mental health support as well of one type or another. Either they're part of groups or some of them are mentors in PTSD groups. Many of them see somebody pretty regularly. So we make sure that they're well supported.
I think the other thing too about our program that I have enjoyed kind of seeing is the support that is kind of forming as our pool of PTSD have grown is the peer support aspect as well. Right. I think that's a very good thing to have other people that understand the journey that you're taking. So
absolutely, yeah.
Oh my goodness, the questions are just coming in everywhere. So usually it's a little quieter than this, but we've got a lot of questions today. So
hot. Everybody's inside.
Everybody's inside enjoying the podcast today. So just one second. So Carolina is asking, during COVID, how do the clients first meet the dog we've selected for them to see their interaction? So do you want to take that? Or?
Yeah, I can take that. So even during COVID, Margaret and Val were able to do meet and greets for clients to meet the dogs, and all with the appropriate protocols in place. A lot of it done, of course, outside, always masked, that kind of thing. Lots of hand washing and wiping things down went on, and then through team training, the clients already would have the dog, and that was done online, and it's just fabulous how that came together, and how well it worked for people as well. And then there's also now some get-togethers regularly among, as Tara is saying, there's kind of some peer support as well as support with Margaret and Val that's ongoing, but they can do some in person now outside doing it.
I think one of the things about COVID that's been really interesting and has been really kind of transformational for PADS is discovering, now that we've actually rolled all these tools out of Zoom and Google Classroom and, all these different tools that we've been using to kind of facilitate learning, is that in so many ways, it's built a more accessible program for us. So for our clients, whether it's our PTSD clients or it's our service dog mobility or hearing clients, et cetera, is that they can do a lot of that heavy lifting of team training in their own homes where they're comfortable and they have their regular supports. And so to kind of do some of that classroom type learning in a virtual setting before they do kind of the in-person stuff. So it cuts down on the amount of time they have to be away from home. And I think, it also paces the learning a little bit better. So it's not all crammed into 2 or 3 continuous weeks, that it can be spread out over several weeks so that people have the opportunity to absorb information and come back and ask questions. So that's been one of the big, I think, silver linings of COVID for us is I think it would have taken us a lot longer to roll something like this out. And I don't know whether or not there would have been kind of the incentive to do so on something that was a little bit of a gamble, but we had no choice and it worked out so beautifully. So it is definitely something that even when we resume, we'll be having some level of kind of hybrid.
I think something interesting too, Caroline, about the process that I've seen is with dogs, with the PTSD service dogs, the work that they do with their clients isn't as overt, and it doesn't happen immediately the same way that it does with our mobility clients, for example, our hearing clients. It takes, the relationship has to build between the dog and the client, because the dog has to get to know what the signs are that this person needs, you know, some kind of interrupting behavior or whatever. The client has to recognize that the dog is actually doing, you know, some kind of interrupting behavior. I had a wonderful comment from a client who said he was frustrated the first, you know, few weeks or month or so that he had his dog, because it kept on coming and bothering him at the most inopportune times. And then he realized what the dog was doing is the dog was alerting him that he was starting to, there was some kind of a tell. But these things take a little bit of time. And so I think that even with doing a lot of this online and the person having the dog and working through these things with over a little bit more time, you know, versus the 2-week team training that was kind of the typical model, I think that's fit really well with our PTSD clients.
And I think it also allows that bonding kind of piece too to happen and just have that quiet kind of time together. I know in the past, you know, the dogs would stay with the clients in the client center, but the client is out of their normal environment. The dog is out of it, like nobody's comfortable, right? Like it's a beautiful facility. So it's not that it's not physically comfortable, but it's just, it's like staying in a home, right? It's not home. So it's nice that at least kind of one part of the equation is in a comfort zone. And I think that probably just kind of rolls out into the relationship. So, okay, I'm gonna scroll back because there's a ton of questions on Facebook here. So, oh, okay, so we're gonna segue a little bit. Caroline is asking for an update on Nootka's brother Campbell. So Catherine is also puppy raising right now. One of our puppies, Campbell.
Oh, Campbell. Campbell is fun. Campbell's learning how to swim. The Vancouver Island puppies, I don't know, I know at least Campbell is not a natural swimmer. He's hilarious. And we live on a lake and it's hot. And I really want him to swim. And he's learning how, but he's hilarious. He's doing really well. I think he loves farm life. And it's helped him to kind of calm down a lot. He chills out really well during the day if I'm not doing anything. Yeah, he's doing really well. He's really healthy. He's stayed really healthy. Yeah, he's very dear, very sweet boy.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Nicole is asking, what qualities are needed in an excellent PTSD dog?
Wow.
Do you want me to?
You know, let's do that together, Tara. So I'll start because I'm thinking about Stark, who was our first PTSD dog, and because we were the co-raisers with Stark. So you know, he's just a really steady boy, and he's very attentive. So they're sensitive, and yet they're kind of very emotionally tuned in, that kind of a sensitive way, and really want to be with their person. That's where they want to be. They don't necessarily want to be with a whole bunch of people. You know, they're not that kind of dog necessarily that wants to be the life of the party or anything like that. Yeah, calm and gentle in their approach with people as well. And a lot of our dogs, I mean, it really depends on the clients, but a lot of our clients are very active. And so we need dogs that have enough energy, right, to be able to do some pretty long walks and hikes and all that kind of thing. Not everybody, but many of them. Yeah, and so a lot of that things is going to be similar to any other service dog where you're matching it to the client specifically. Tara, go, because you'll probably be able to think of other things.
I think the other thing too is, you know, we have a lot of very sweet, smushy, kind of dialed in dogs that are very sensitive to people's feelings, etc. I have one lying at my feet right now who is very dialed into how I'm feeling, and yet there is a threshold. So one of the things we're looking for in a dog particularly a dog that's supporting someone with PTSD, is that they don't get wrapped up in it, right? So it doesn't stress them out when somebody is upset or agitated. They're attuned to it and they're responding to it, but it doesn't tend to kind of make them feel more stressed. And that's us looking out for the dog, because it would be very easy to place a dog like that with someone in that kind of role, and then to actually do harm to the dog, where the dog's mental health is suffering because they're constantly worried. And so we need that resilience in our PTSD dogs. And I think the other piece too is, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, you touched on this, is that they're not necessarily interested in a lot of people. And so often, sometimes we look at dogs coming through and we kind of look at it as like the PTSD, AFD stream. They're kind of coming up and we're trying to figure out which one is best for them. And often that's the piece that kind of parts the path for them, is that the AFD dogs are the dogs that will seek out others that are upset or that are experiencing something that is distressing, etc. They respond to emotion, but they're interested in other people. Whereas our PTSD dogs often are the dogs that really couldn't be all that fussed about other people. They're very dialed into one person. And so sometimes that means the bond takes a little bit longer to kind of form. It's not instantaneous. Because, like our golden retrievers, for example, they would go home with anybody, right? Like they could kind of have that, everybody is my friend. And so, some of the PTSD dogs we have, we're looking for the dogs who are like, no, not everybody is my friend, but I'm with this person. So yeah. So I think those are kind of two kind of distinguishing kind of factors. But I think you also touched on something, Catherine, is energy levels. So very different clients, different needs. And so finding the right match for each individual client, because you're right, a lot of our PTSD clients are very active, and not all of our dogs could keep up with them. So, so
yeah.
Else?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, because I think it's interesting. Although we want the PTSD dogs to focus solely on the client, sometimes we do have to remind the clients, because sometimes the dogs, they get to know family members, and the dog wants to, sees that another family member or somebody else is going through something, some kind of arousal, and the dog wants to go alert them. And so we actually have to remind the clients that, okay, well, hang on, we don't want the dog doing double duty. We just want the dog, focusing on use. So, but yeah, Bowyer, for example, would have been a really good PTSD dog, because he likes one-on-one, but I don't take him when I do like any kind of disaster response. I do as well into group situations. I don't take him because he doesn't really want to be around a lot of people, and he certainly doesn't want to be touched by a lot of people. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a few people who are saying, where is Bowyer? So do you think Bowyer will come up on camera? Or can we aim the camera at him?
Yeah, we can. Hey, bud. He is right out. Hey, buddy. Oh, hot dog. Come on. I'm going to just take the camera down to his level, because Boyer's hot and tired. There he is.
There he is. Hi, Bowyer. You're working hard there, buddy, in the heat, aren't you?
Yeah. It's warm.
Oh my goodness, this is fabulous. Well, there's lots of folks. I'll let you read the comments. There's lots of people saying hello, so I'll let you kind of read through those afterwards. But lots of people enjoying and just very appreciative of the work that you're doing. I'm just looking to see if there's any more.
Can I talk about, because I know we don't have a ton of time, but I would love to talk about the little bit of the follow-up interviews that I did.
Yeah.
Because this is just so exciting for me, both as a science nerd and also just being part of this program. So in February, I got to interview all of our clients. At that point, we had 10 clients, And I talked to all of them because I wanted to see how things were going and just get some feedback on kind of specific things. So the clients had their dogs between the shortest was 10 weeks and the longest was over 2 years. And so here's the things that came out. It's wonderful. So in terms of their physical well-being, all of the clients talked about improvements in their physical health. They talked about walking more often, walking more regularly, walking further. They talked about feeling more fit, feeling more energy, and they also talked about having less pain. So of course, this isn't everyone didn't endorse all of these, but these are different things that came up. Everyone endorsed improvements in terms of their mental health and their emotional well-being. So they talked about just overall their moods being better. Some of them thought it was because they were outside a lot more. They felt more stable emotionally, so they weren't having those ups and downs. They used the word happier. I just feel a whole lot happier, which of course is subjective, hard to, but positive. Feeling calmer and feeling more resilient. Less anxiety, less depression, fewer panic attacks, less negative self-talk. Many of them, this was so exciting, reported reductions in their pain medication. So this is medication for anxiety, for depression, for GI and digestive issues, which are very common with PTSD, sleep medications, marijuana, THC, that kind of thing. So reductions in that. Most of them talked about their relationships being better, whether that was relationships within their family or either that they were getting out a bit more, or depending on kind of when they got their dog and when COVID hit, or that they would be getting out more once COVID had come, so they just were more comfortable. In terms of activities of daily living, so that's things like groceries, shopping, medical appointments, banking, going to the drugstore, just those kinds of things. Everybody said that was so much easier now. They were able to do that, many of them on their own, whereas before they had to take somebody with them. They were able to do it on their own. Really neat one I hadn't thought about at all was general self-care. So a few people said, I'm just taking better care of myself. I'm eating better and I'm eating more regularly because I have to feed my dog and I want my dog to eat well. I want to eat well. I want to be healthy for my dog. They, of course, the more regular exercise, getting up earlier in the morning and happier when they get up, and more structure and routine, which was really helping them get through the day. And then in terms of sleep, fewer nightmares, which is just, fantastic. Now, this isn't everybody. Some people, did better and then were kind of worse for a while. They didn't know why, it's up and down for sure. But half of the people said their sleep had improved greatly since they'd gotten the dog. And then just in terms of general quality of life. And so the big one, and it makes me tear up just thinking about it, is several people said, the dog has saved my life. I don't know if I'd still be here, right? So big deal. Yeah, big deal. And another one I hadn't thought about, which was really cool. A few people talked about it was really rewarding because, like, one of the things that we talk about with applicants is they're going from having almost invisible disability to having a visible disability once you have a dog in a cape with you. People look at you and they wonder. And I noticed that difference from having lots of puppies in training with the yellow vest that says in training to having Bowyer in a blue cape. And people started asking me, well, what do you do for me? That kind of thing, which normally, when you got a puppy in training, they read the vest. And so you don't get that as often, but so you're more visible. And which can be good or bad, depending on the person, right? Whether you like that kind of interaction. And a few people talked about it was really rewarding to be able to talk to people and educate them. whether it was about PTSD or PADS and the PTSD program, just mental health in general. One person said, this is what PTSD looks like. I look like a normal person, right? And this is what PTSD looks like. So very, just lovely. And then, of course, I don't feel alone anymore, which was beautiful. So it was just such a privilege to be able to do these follow-up calls. I loved it.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those with us, because I'm we're getting teary-eyed. I know, I mean, I have heard many of the individual stories, but it's also just beautiful to hear kind of like the collective response in so many ways that that these placements are so life-changing. And we have seen that with our conversations that we've had with Juliet and Stark, and some of our other clients that we've kind of had here in the past. But I just think it's neat as our program is growing. And I think that's the other thing I just wanted to touch on today is we get a lot of inquiries and questions about why we only place our PTSD dogs in the Lower Mainland and in Calgary, and kind of looking at that side of things. And but I think there is that element of that follow-up support. It's a different program, right? So it's a lot longer, it's a lot, but it's also kind of creating that community of support so that the team has that environment in which to kind of thrive. So, I mean, obviously our hope is down the road to be able to kind of expand and do more, but right now that's kind of where we're at. So,
I think that's not black and white at this point. I think that's the door is still open to that, but it's really going to depend a lot on the individual circumstances. I also wanted to say one of the things that a lot of people talked about, I touched on it earlier, but I really want to emphasize it again, partly because if people are listening who are thinking of applying, or if some of our clients are on this and listening, many people also talked about it takes time for that trust in the relationship to build. So it's not instant for everybody. And that's really important to know, because that first few months that you've got a service dog is it feels like a lot of responsibility, and there's a lot weighing on it, and it feels so important, and people want to get it right, and just to know it's really normal, that it takes time for that trust and that relationship to develop, and that it's okay. And part of that is also trusting that whole process, right? The match, that trusting the match that was made, trusting that you can do it, right? Because you can, and knowing that the dog can do it. Yeah.
It is a huge learning curve. And, it's interesting that you say that, because it's one of the things that caught me by surprise becoming a client, particularly because my situation is unique in that I had lived with the dog I was matched with for 5 years at the time we were matched. So I didn't think it was going to be a hard transition. I thought it would be quite easy. But moving into that state of like learning, I mean, she then came back to me with all these skills of like, how do I maintain these, and how do I reinforce them appropriately so that they continue to kind of shine and work and, be reliable, and, all of these kinds of things. And I'm coming in with 14 years of experience with PADS and training puppies and all these things. And it was still very, very hard to kind of make that transition. So I think it's an important point for our potential applicants to hear is those early days, it's not an easy button, right? I mean, the dog is wonderful, but it's takes a lot of work on both sides. But I also think that it's probably some of the most valuable work you'll ever do, is kind of building into that relationship with the dog. So it's a lot of fun. It's very worthwhile, but it can be exhausting. So, but I'm looking here at our time and we've gone way over, but I appreciate you sticking around. And for those of you that are still watching, we appreciate you hanging out with us. There's lots of messages. A thank you to Catherine and Margaret and Val and all of these amazing dogs from our friend Rafi who's watching on Zoom. But the rest of the comments I will let you check out in the comment section of the Facebook Live from many fans. But thank you for the incredible work that you do kind of within our program, not just the PTSD program, but as a volunteer for PADS in so many ways. So, and it's so lovely to see your smile face. It's been so hopefully we will see you in person again soon. And for those of you watching next week, we will not be tuning in Tuesday. Tara is taking a long overdue week of vacation, so there won't be a broadcast next week. But then we will be back for the rest of July with a lineup of guests. So, and thank you so much for joining us, Catherine.
Oh, thank you. And thank you everybody for who joined in. It's just lovely. I could talk about this stuff all day. So thanks, Tara, for the invitation.
Well, thank you for joining us. We'll have to have you back at some point, but stay cool up there and give Bowyer and Campbell a pat for us. All right.
I will. Okay.
Take care. Bye.